A beautiful life with a dark shadow. What happens when the brightest dreams are overshadowed by a cruel twist of fate? How does a vibrant young woman, full of life and ambition, suddenly vanish without a trace, leaving her family haunted by unanswered questions? Sabora Gagan's story began in the quaint town of Tana, Albania, where she was born on September 14, 1991. Her life took its first unexpected turn when her parents separated, leaving her mother, Elisabetta, to care for her children alone. Determined to provide a better future, Elisabetta made the bold decision to relocate the family to Rome, Italy. The move demanded relentless sacrifice, as Elisabetta worked tirelessly, often putting her own needs aside, to ensure her children had opportunities she could only dream of. In the bustling streets of Rome, Sabora, lovingly called CB by her friends, blossomed into a vibrant and strikingly beautiful young woman. With her dark, radiant skin, long flowing hair, and a magnetic energy, she drew people in wherever she went. Her cheerful nature made her a favorite among classmates and neighbors alike. Sabora loved music, parties, and the carefree moments of youth, yet beneath her lively exterior was a deeply thoughtful and compassionate soul. Sabora often spoke of her love for children and her dream of becoming a teacher. She also harbored a fascination for the world of beauty and glamour, even winning a regional beauty contest. But practicality soon took precedence in her life. To support her family, she worked as a waitress in a local restaurant. Her dedication, charm, and work ethic earned her admiration from colleagues and patrons alike. For a time, everything seemed to be falling into place. Sabora's life was full of promise, her days brimming with hope and ambition. She seemed destined for a future filled with opportunities and fulfillment. Yet, life often weaves shadows into the brightest moments. When she met Marco, a man much older, strikingly handsome but carrying a dark past, her journey took a fateful turn. At first, Marco seemed to embody the kind of love and stability Sabora had long sought. But beneath his charm lay a darkness that would soon cloud her promising future. Would this love story fulfill her dreams, or would it mark the beginning of a nightmare? The answers lay ahead, hidden within a trail of heartbreak, choices, and tragedy. The allure of Marco. When Sabora Gagani first met Marco, it felt like fate. He was 31, tall, charismatic, and armed with a disarming smile that seemed to melt away doubts. Marco was the kind of man who knew how to talk, how to charm, and, most importantly, how to make a young woman feel special. For 18-year-old Sabora, who was navigating her first taste of independence in Rome, Marco seemed like a man who could offer her the world, a protector, a lover, and someone who could help her achieve the dreams she held so dear. But Marco wasn't what he seemed. Behind his captivating exterior lay a man with a troubled past. He was no stranger to the local police, with a reputation for violent outbursts and drug abuse. His charm masked a history of failed relationships, including a bitter divorce. Yet Sabora, blinded by the thrill of first love, either couldn't or didn't want to see the cracks beneath the surface. Their relationship quickly became intense. Marco showered her with attention, whispering promises of a future filled with love and adventure. He painted a picture of a fresh start, far from the struggles they faced in Italy. Spain, he claimed, is where our future lies. He described the coastal towns, the sun-soaked beaches, and the chance to build a life free from their pasts. It sounded like a dream, and for Sabora, yearning for independence and adventure, it was impossible to resist. Her family, however, particularly her mother Elisabetta, was less convinced. Elisabetta couldn't ignore Marco's age or his unsettling demeanor. She questioned his intentions, concerned about the control he seemed to have over her daughter. "Are you sure this is the life you want?" she asked repeatedly, her voice heavy with worry. But Sabora, head over heels in love, dismissed her mother's concerns. She was determined to prove everyone wrong and believed in Marco's promises of stability and a bright future. In 2011, Sabora made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. Despite her mother's misgivings, she packed her belongings and moved with Marco to Torremolinos, a picturesque coastal town in Spain. There, they rented a modest apartment near the beach in the La Carihuela area, where the sun and sea painted an idyllic backdrop for their new beginning. For a while, it seemed like the dream might actually come true. In Torremolinos, Sabora quickly found work as a waitress at a local restaurant. Her natural charm and warm personality made her popular among customers and colleagues alike. Marco, too, initially appeared to settle in. He found a job as a cook, impressing people with his talent for making pizzas. To outsiders, they looked like a young couple carving out a happy, simple life together. But even the sunniest days have shadows. Marco's inability to hold down a job soon became apparent. He blamed coworkers, bad luck, and circumstances beyond his control. The truth, however, was simpler. Marco couldn't escape his own flaws. Arguments began creeping into their relationship, initially small and easy to dismiss, but over time, they grew louder, uglier, and more frequent, turning their home into a battleground. When Elisabetta visited them during this time, she hoped to find her daughter thriving. Instead, she witnessed a relationship already fraying at the edges. Marco's temper was unmistakable, his frustration boiling over in bitter, public arguments. The sight of Marco berating her daughter left Elisabetta deeply concerned. "This isn't normal," she told Sabora, but Sabora, torn between love and fear, insisted everything was fine. "I'm happy, Mama, really," she said, forcing a smile. To outsiders, Marco and Sabora's relationship still seemed enviable, but behind closed doors, the cracks widened. Marco's jealousy became suffocating, his insecurity manifesting in controlling behavior. He questioned who she spoke to, where she went, and how she spent her time. His love, once warm and protective, now felt like a cage. For Sabora, the thrill of their early days had faded into a confusing reality. She clung to memories of Marco's promises and the hope that the man she fell in love with still existed beneath the anger. "He's just stressed," she told herself, but deep down, she knew the truth. Her relationship had turned toxic, and she was living in a cycle of love, fear, and manipulation. The tension reached its peak when Marco's financial instability worsened. His failures at work and his inability to meet expectations fueled his growing resentment. He became increasingly paranoid, accusing Sabora of betrayal when she spent time with friends or worked late shifts. The idyllic coastal life they had envisioned together became a distant dream, replaced by a reality defined by conflict and disillusionment. Was Sabora trapped in a relationship that had become dangerous? Could she find a way out before it was too late? Or had love already transformed into something far darker than she could imagine? The answers lay ahead, drawing closer with every passing moment. Shadows loomed over the life she had hoped to build, threatening to engulf the vibrant young woman who had once dreamed of freedom and adventure. The stage was set for a turning point, but whether it would lead to redemption or tragedy was still unclear. The cracks begin to show. The cracks in Sabora Gagani and Marco's relationship widened as the months passed. Marco's once captivating charm had faded, replaced by possessiveness and an explosive temper that seemed to ignite over the smallest provocations. His jealousy consumed him, turning every aspect of Sabora's life into a source of suspicion. Friends, work, even a casual glance from a stranger could spark an argument that dragged on for hours, leaving Sabora emotionally drained and isolated. Sabora's once vibrant personality began to dim. The cheerful, lively young woman her friends and family adored grew quieter, more withdrawn, and cautious with her words. Those closest to her noticed the change, but Sabora worked hard to hide her struggles. Her conversations, once filled with dreams of a bright future, shifted to the constant arguments and tensions that dominated her life. Though she avoided saying it outright, her mother, Elisabetta, began to suspect there was more to Marco's outbursts than just words. During visits to their Torremolinos apartment, Elisabetta noticed bruises on Sabora's arms and shoulders. "What happened?" she would ask. But Sabora always had an excuse. "A fall here, a kitchen mishap there." "I'm fine, Mama. He's just going through a rough time," she insisted, offering a faint, unconvincing smile. It soon became clear that Marco wasn't just going through a rough time. His paranoia reached terrifying heights, and his control over Sabora tightened. He monitored her phone, questioned her every move, and even waited outside her workplace to ensure she wasn't speaking to anyone he didn't approve of. The arguments escalated into screaming matches that echoed through their apartment walls, alarming neighbors. The sunny paradise of Torremolinos had become a suffocating prison for Sabora. In a rare moment of courage, Sabora confided in her mother. "Mama," she said softly. "If I ever leave Marco, I'll have to disappear. He'll never let me go otherwise." Her voice trembled with fear, the words a quiet plea for help that would haunt Elisabetta forever. By mid-2014, after nearly 3 years of turmoil, Sabora made the decision to reclaim her life. She left Marco and moved into her own small, modest apartment. To her, it felt like freedom. Shortly after settling in, she called her mother. For the first time in years, her voice was light and full of hope. "I finally feel like a butterfly," she said, as though shedding the heavy weight of her past. Elisabetta felt a flicker of hope that her daughter's life might finally take a turn for the better. But Marco wasn't ready to let her go. He showed up at her new apartment uninvited, pleading for another chance. He promised change, swore he couldn't live without her, and even proposed marriage. Against her better judgment, Sabora hesitated. His words tugged at her heart, and she reluctantly allowed him back into her life. The peace was short-lived. Within weeks, Marco's jealousy and temper resurfaced, worse than ever. Sabora tried to end things again, but this time, Marco's reaction was chillingly different. He didn't argue or plead. Instead, he became colder, more calculated, with a quiet tension that sent chills through Sabora. His controlled anger was more frightening than any shouting match they had ever endured. By July 2014, Sabora seemed determined to end the cycle for good. She told her mother she had finally left Marco. "It's over, Mama. This time, I mean it," she said with conviction. But just days later, Sabora vanished without a trace. When Elisabetta couldn't reach her daughter, panic set in. Friends and family searched frantically, but there were no signs of where Sabora had gone or what had happened to her. Her apartment was eerily quiet, her belongings untouched. Marco, when questioned, claimed he had no idea where she was, maintaining a demeanor that was equal parts concerned and indifferent. For those who loved her, the bright, ambitious young woman who had once dreamed of a life filled with love and success seemed to have been swallowed by a darkness she couldn't escape. Sabora's disappearance left behind a haunting silence, and for Elisabetta, the words her daughter had once spoken echoed endlessly. "He'll never let me go." The world she had fought so hard to build was gone, leaving only questions and a trail of heartache. Had Marco's obsession and control finally escalated into something irreversible? The answers seemed trapped in the shadows of a life that had once shone so brightly. The disappearance. On the evening of July 7, 2014, Sabora Gagani sent a brief WhatsApp message to Marco. It was a mundane text, but it would become her last known communication. The following day, Marco called Elisabetta, his voice dripping with concern. "Has Sabora come back to Italy?" he asked, feigning worry. Elisabetta's heart sank. "No," she replied sharply. "What's going on, Marco?" Marco claimed that they had argued 2 days earlier and that Sabora had stormed out of their Torremolinos apartment, leaving all her belongings behind. "She just left," he insisted. "I think she needed space." But Elisabetta didn't believe him. During their last conversation, Sabora had been clear about her plans to move on and reclaim her life. Why, then, would she vanish without a word? The story only grew stranger in the days that followed. Marco changed his account, saying that a security guard had seen Sabora leaving with 2 suitcases. Later, he told neighbors she had been spotted boarding a bus. Then came another version. She was seen arguing with a dark-skinned man. Finally, Marco suggested she might have traveled to Argentina. Each story contradicted the last, raising more questions than answers. Elisabetta's unease quickly turned into dread. Sabora wasn't the type to disappear without contacting her family, especially her mother. Desperate for answers, Elisabetta reported her daughter missing to the Spanish authorities. She didn't mince words, directly accusing Marco. "He knows something," she told police. "He's lying." Spanish authorities launched an investigation, questioning Marco as the last person to see Sabora. But Marco stuck to his conflicting accounts, offering no useful information. A search of their apartment revealed some of Sabora's belongings, but there was no evidence of foul play. With no concrete leads, the case stalled, leaving Elisabetta and her family in a state of harrowing limbo. As weeks turned into months, Elisabetta refused to give up. She reached out to Italian and Spanish media, sharing her daughter's story and plastering missing posters of Sabora's face across Torremolinos. Despite her relentless efforts, no leads emerged. Marco, meanwhile, continued his life as though nothing had happened, going to work, socializing, and maintaining a calm, detached demeanor. The years passed slowly, each day a painful reminder of the uncertainty surrounding Sabora's disappearance. Elisabetta clung to hope even as it dwindled. She often repeated, "A mother knows," her voice heavy with grief. "I know something terrible has happened to my daughter." Despite the lack of evidence, doubt surrounded Marco. His ever-changing accounts of what had happened to Sabora only deepened suspicions. Why was he so composed, treating her disappearance as though it were a minor inconvenience? What was he hiding? The truth lay buried, shrouded in lies and unanswered questions, waiting to claw its way into the light. What had happened to Sabora Gagani, and would her mother ever uncover the secrets Marco seemed so desperate to conceal? Years of uncertainty. The years following Sabora Gagani's disappearance were a relentless storm of anguish for her family. Elisabetta, her devoted mother, refused to let her daughter's name fade into obscurity. She tirelessly reached out to authorities, journalists, and anyone who might help uncover the truth. Her home became both a shrine of hope and a place of mourning, filled with photos of Sabora and reminders of her vibrant life. Every corner seemed to echo the memory of her beloved daughter, her laughter, and the dreams she had once shared. While Elisabetta fought for answers, Marco's life moved on. He remained in Torremolinos, blending into the community. To casual acquaintances, he appeared polite and unremarkable, showing no outward signs of guilt or remorse. He shaved his head, grew a beard, and entered new relationships, one of which ended with his partner filing a complaint against him for abuse. Beneath his calm exterior, Marco's instability lingered. Marco drifted between jobs, often leaving under suspicious circumstances. His reputation for violence and erratic behavior quietly grew, though it was never enough to draw serious attention from the authorities. Those who knew him closely began to notice cracks in his facade, paranoia, jealousy, and flashes of violent anger. During this time, Marco was in a relationship with a woman named Paula, a hard-working mother fighting to regain custody of her children. Drugs belonging to Marco had led to their removal, leaving Paula desperate to create stability in hopes of bringing them home. She endured his outbursts, trapped by her circumstances, but her fear of Marco grew. On May 16, 2023, Paula, excited about plans for the evening, left her workplace in high spirits. By the next morning, her lifeless body was found, her life violently cut short. Marco's mask had slipped completely, leaving a trail of horror in its wake. Paula's tragic death cast a harrowing light on Marco's history, bringing renewed attention to the disappearance of Sabora. The man who had walked away unscathed for nearly a decade now faced a new reckoning. But for Elisabetta, the question remained: what had Marco done to her daughter? The answers seemed closer than ever, but the pain of the truth loomed large. The morning of May 17, 2023, began with piercing screams, horrifying, desperate cries that echoed through the apartment shared by Marco and Paula. Neighbors froze in their tracks, their hearts pounding as Paula's voice carried a chilling plea. "Help me!" she screamed, her words cutting through the walls with raw terror. Hearing the commotion, Victor, the owner of the restaurant where Paula worked, and another employee rushed to the apartment. They pounded on the door, shouting for Marco to open it. Faint, muffled whimpers of pain seeped through the walls, sending chills down their spines. Then Marco's voice emerged, disturbingly calm and composed. "Everything's fine," he said. "Paula's gone back to bed." But nothing was fine. Sensing imminent danger, Victor ran to retrieve a spare key, while the other called the police. As they waited, Marco exited the apartment, his face emotionless. He walked past them, down the stairs, and out of the building without a word. Inside, the horror he left behind remained hidden until the police arrived. When officers unlocked the door, the grim reality unfolded. Paula's lifeless body lay crumpled on the floor, her clothes soaked in blood. She had been stabbed 14 times, her final moments marked by a brutal struggle. The room told its own story. Overturned furniture, blood splattered across the walls, and an eerie silence that hung in the air. Marco was arrested hours later at a local bar, casually sipping a beer as though nothing had happened. His detached demeanor sent shivers through those around him, his calmness betraying the violence he had unleashed. In custody, Marco's responses were unnervingly indifferent, his lack of remorse casting an even darker shadow over an already harrowing tragedy. Investigators now face the task of unraveling not only Paula's murder, but the trail of pain and unanswered questions that seemed to follow Marco wherever he went. For those who knew him, one question loomed above all: what horrors had he hidden, and who else had suffered at his hands? Marco's confession and the grim discovery. On the evening of May 17, 2023, Marco sat in the police station, handcuffed and surrounded by investigators. His previously calm demeanor began to crack. His eyes drifted to a bulletin board filled with missing person posters, and one image seemed to freeze him in place: the face of Sabora Gagani. His expression shifted, his voice lowering into an unsteady tone. "I want to talk," he muttered, his words thick with a mix of tension and resignation, "about something that's been haunting me for years." The room fell silent as Marco began his confession, his words cutting through the air like a blade. He described an argument with Sabora that escalated beyond control. "I didn't mean to," he repeated, as though saying it enough times could absolve him of the horror. He admitted to killing her in a fit of rage. But his story didn't end there. With a chilling detachment, Marco detailed what happened afterward. He said he had wrapped Sabora's lifeless body in plastic, placed it inside a wooden crate, and hidden it in their Torremolinos apartment. He described how he had covered the crate with lime to mask the smell and even built a false wall to conceal it. The confession horrified investigators, but they weren't ready to take Marco's words at face value. They needed proof. On May 22, 2023, armed with Marco's admission, investigators returned to the apartment he had described. Now occupied by another couple, the apartment became the focal point of a meticulous search. The residents, though shocked, cooperated fully, allowing police to examine every corner. Initially, the search revealed nothing. The walls appeared unaltered, and no irregularities were visible. Still, Marco's confession lingered in their minds, urging them forward. Investigators used densitometers and microcameras, carefully drilling small holes into the walls to probe for hidden spaces. Days passed without results, and doubt began to creep in. Was Marco lying yet again? But during their fourth search, the team noticed a discrepancy in the floor plan. Comparing the apartment to a neighboring unit, they found an unexplained hollow space behind one of the bedroom walls. With the necessary authorization, officers broke through the wall. Behind it, they found a scene of unimaginable horror. Inside the concealed space was a large wooden crate. As they pried it open, a nauseating stench filled the room. Layers of lime covered its contents, but as they dug through, the truth emerged. The first object uncovered was a bloodied knife, carefully wrapped in plastic. Then came personal belongings: a bracelet, a piece of fabric, items once owned by Sabora. Finally, at the heart of the crate, they found a sleeping bag. Inside it were human remains, twisted and contorted, the violent end to a life filled with promise. When the news reached Elisabetta, it hit her like a thunderclap. The years of sleepless nights, desperate prayers, and endless hope culminated in this devastating revelation. DNA testing confirmed what Elisabetta already knew in her heart. The remains were Sabora's. Elisabetta's grief was immeasurable. Through tears, she whispered, "She didn't deserve this. She was my light, my hope, and he took her from me." The autopsy revealed the brutal nature of Sabora's death. Multiple stab wounds, each one a cruel reminder of the betrayal and violence she had endured. For her family, the discovery brought a bitter mix of relief and devastation. At last, they had answers, but they came at an unimaginable cost. Meanwhile, Marco faced charges for Paula's murder, and scrutiny over Sabora's case intensified. His behavior grew increasingly erratic, and during a January 2024 court hearing, Marco handed over a 17-page handwritten letter offering new explanations. In it, he admitted to killing Paula but claimed it was an act of self-defense during a drug and alcohol-fueled argument. However, his account of Sabora's death took an even darker and more bizarre turn. Marco alleged that members of the Albanian mafia were responsible for Sabora's murder. According to him, he owed the mafia $25,000 from a failed business venture. He claimed they had come to collect the debt, leading to a violent confrontation in which one of the mobsters killed Sabora. His role, he insisted, was limited to disposing of her body under duress. The story was grotesque, implausible, and filled with holes, but Marco delivered it with unwavering confidence, as though daring anyone to challenge his version of events. Investigators, however, saw through Marco's lies. His shifting accounts only deepened the tragedy of Sabora's life and death, highlighting the web of manipulation and violence that had ensnared her. By mid-2024, Marco awaited trial for Paula's murder, facing charges of domestic abuse and premeditated homicide. The case of Sabora's death remained under investigation, with Marco's confession serving as a grim roadmap for authorities to uncover the truth. While justice seemed closer than ever, for Elisabetta, the pain of her daughter's loss remained a constant companion. He may have silenced her, Elisabetta vowed, but her story will not end with him. She channeled her grief into raising awareness about domestic violence, determined to honor her daughter's memory by ensuring that no other family would endure the same heartbreak. In October 2024, Sabora was finally brought home to Italy. Her funeral was a somber affair, attended by friends, family, and members of the community who had supported Elisabetta through years of anguish. Balloons were released into the sky, each carrying messages of love and remembrance for the young woman who had dreamed of becoming a teacher, a model, and so much more. The case left an indelible mark on everyone it touched. It served as a haunting reminder of how love can turn into a weapon, and how silence in the face of abuse can have deadly consequences. For those who knew Sabora, her story became a symbol of resilience, a call to action to confront the dark realities of domestic violence. For Elisabetta, the road to justice was far from over. Yet, as she prepared to lay her daughter to rest, she found solace in the love and support of those who shared her sorrow. Though nothing could erase the pain, keeping Sabora's story alive remained her mission, ensuring her light would shine on even in the darkest corners. For more gripping true crime stories that uncover the truths behind the headlines, subscribe now to our channel and never miss an update.